Hi, I'm Aeon. In this video, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to more Geometry Dash. Today, we're going to be discussing something that could potentially change Geometry Dash forever. And I'm not saying this hyperbole. This is an absolutely insane development that has been happening over the past few days now. And I caught interest in it. I think this is a really interesting thing to be discussing. And I want to talk to you guys about it and share what I've kind of learned about it, as well as have a little bit of a discussion with you guys to hear what you guys think. Now, before we start, I do know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, Aeon, you are backpedaling. You are a hypocrite. And I will say, first and foremost, my stance is still the same. I will not budge on the fact that I think that this should be considered a cheat up until official endorsement by Robtop, or it is added as a feature in-game. It is an objective advantage to have a mod such as this one or any other mod outside of vanilla GD, and this gives such an insane advantage over regular vanilla play that the daemon list has said, as you can see here, as it stands, it is unlikely it will be allowed on the daemon list. As incredible as it is, it gives an undeniable advantage over vanilla players, which far surpasses what 2.1 has to offer. It is subject to change. It kind of depends on reception, but it is something that the daemon list is currently saying that should not be considered legitimate up until the fact that it has been, as I said, either endorsed by Robtop or added in-game as a feature. Now, what essentially is this? What this is, it is a mod and a tool that makes you click between frames. This is very confusing. It's taking me a little bit of time to try and figure this out. But essentially, Geometry Dash runs on a tick system. We have all heard about it. Geometry Dash currently runs on 240 ticks per second. What physics bypass does is essentially remove this tick limit and increase it to whatever you put it as. So physics bypass changes it from 240 ticks per second to, if you write in 360, you now run at 360 ticks per second. Basically, what the ticks are is how frequently the game is updated per second. So if you run at 360, the game will check 360 times per second instead of the default 240 ticks per second, which is what people are so up in arms about physics bypass. People dislike physics bypass and do not consider it legitimate because you can increase the value of the in-game TPS outside of what you can normally do. What click between the frames does is not change the tick value. However, it removes a snap feature within the in-game tick per second format that makes it so that you can click whenever you want, and you are basically just limited to the polling rate of your device instead of the game. This is confusing. Basically, when you play Geometry Dash, the 240 ticks per second that you play with, when you make an input in between tick 1 and tick 2, your input is not registered until you hit the next tick. So let's say you have a line here, right? If you click anywhere in between tick 1 and tick 2, it will not actually register until it hits tick 2. This mod makes it so that this is irrelevant. The ticks essentially only really check for physics engine updates. It's not really relevant to how you play the game. It is only relevant to how things happen in the game. It is basically a stabilitator for the physics engine of the game, right? Clicking in between it doesn't really change anything, and that's why this is such a huge deal for the playing community, is that this doesn't change physics-related anything. The physics run identical to how they do in game. The difference is just higher accuracy on your inputs, right? So unlike physics bypass, which creates more bugs by the higher you go, and if we remember, Robtop essentially, I don't remember if it was 100% confirmed or not, but essentially the working hypotheses of why Rob didn't make the base TPS for GD 360 instead of 240 is the fact that 360 basically just broke way too many levels, and 240 was like a middle ground of this is very good for high end play and will not make the game unplayable for the best players, but it also doesn't break 50% of all the levels that exist in the game, right? Make complete sense. Because this doesn't change how the game run currently, the 240 TPS that is base game vanilla GD can stay. However, it will increase the accuracy of your inputs. Let's take the SEO device or the Razer Viper 8K. These have an input polling rate of 8,000 hertz. Essentially what this means is pretty much the same as the TPS, is that my device, my SEO device, will check for inputs and changes in the input 8,000 times per second. This will be the accuracy of your game. You will play on 240 TPS in game, but the accuracy of your input, your straight fly, your wave, your timings will be based on the accuracy of your device instead. It will no longer be bound to the game ticks. It will be bound to your device. And this is massive in the context of jump dash because precision is everything. Precision is king in GD. Your precision is essentially what determines whether or not you're insanely good at the game or just really good at the game, right? Having a mod or a feature that entirely plays exactly the same physics-wise as the current vanilla game does, but with the precision of 8,000 polling rate based on your save device, your mouse, your keyboard, is absolutely unreal. The big thing for me personally when it came to physics bypass versus regular GD was the fact that it essentially just changed how the game played for an advantage. You changed the game's physics, you changed how things worked to get an objective advantage. In this case, you are not changing how the game plays, you are just getting an advantage. Adding this to the game as a vanilla feature would essentially not really do much other than just make the game far more precise. And to me personally, I think having the game as close to accurate as humanly possible is just a good thing for the game's longevity. If we ever hit a point where you can't really get more precise and you are getting bottlenecked by the fact that the game isn't precise anymore, that's when the game starts to dwindle off in popularity for top play. And you can kind of already see that with people feeling like 2.2 isn't precise enough. And I get it. I 100% understand that. And I, to an extent, do really agree with this because I feel like I'm kind of stuck in the point where I can feel the delay when I'm playing something really difficult. I can feel how the delay is impacting my gameplay and my performance at the highest level of difficulty that I play. With this, I really don't see us getting to a point anytime soon where this discrepancy in input latency is going to affect gameplay to a point where we feel like we're getting bottlenecked. Essentially, having this frame unlocker where it doesn't snap to the next tick will allow us much more precise inputs, and it will make a lot more people capable of playing at the highest end because FPS doesn't matter here. I don't know why I waited so long to mention this, but FPS does not matter in this case. And I think that is one of the crazy things. A lot of people have tried it out for themselves just to like fiddle around with it. And Localizer played Bloodbath on 60 FPS with this mod, and he beat it in 10 minutes. 60 FPS using this click between the frames mod is essentially the exact same as playing higher refresh rates. It is unreal. And I think that's the cool thing. I think that is one of the things that is really, really cool. It makes GD somehow less pay to win, but also more. And the reason why I say more is because of the fact that your monitor will matter a lot more. Currently doesn't really matter too much because you can't like have insane click latency anyway because, well, as I said, kind of like snaps to the next tick. To be at like the highest level, you will kind of like need an OLED now or even a CRT where there is basically non-existent input latency. And that's going to be an important thing. So, and OLED monitors are very expensive, which isn't really a good thing, but, you know, it's still fascinating to think about, right? You can have a bad PC that can't really run many levels, but you can still perform at the best level. If you want to play Ocular Miracle at full detail, but you can't because you can't run at 240 FPS, that doesn't really matter anymore because you can run it at 60 FPS, but still play the game identically to how you would on 240 FPS because it's your device that matters, right? It's what you play with that matters. If you have the same device, playing 60 FPS or 240 FPS with this mod enabled is identical because your device is the same. The only difference is really how the game looks on your screen. So it might look a little bit choppy, but it doesn't feel choppy to play it, right? Anyway, to summarize real fast, there's going to be a lack of physics related bugs because there won't be any, because it will still run at 240 TPS, exactly the same as current in-game TPS is, so there's no physics-related bugs. It will allow for weaker devices to play at a much higher and much more competent level because your FPS is irrelevant, and there is essentially no downsides to performance in-game. What is the downside here? The downside, obviously, currently is the fact that it's a mod that you're forced to have geode for, and it is an objective advantage to vanilla GD. But what is the downside of adding this to vanilla GD? It doesn't change anything. Rob doesn't have to do any like fiddling around with the physics because the physics stay the same. It's just the game becomes more precise, right? My final thoughts are essentially this. I think this is Rob's way of kind of like reconciling with the top player community. I think if he adds this, no one is ever going to complain ever again about anything relating to playing high-end levels in 2.2 because it's pretty, I would say is probably just better than 2.1 bypass because even that was kind of like bottlenecked by not the consistency thing, the latency of the game's engine, right? This doesn't have that. I'm very curious to see how this develops. I'm very curious to see what Rob has to say about it, because this is huge. I was very much against adding the option to increase from 240 TPS to 360 TPS in game, because I thought it kind of like removed the idea of the universal physics as a whole. But this doesn't have that downside. This does not have this downside, and I would love to see Rob implement it in 2.206, which he has said he's working on as soon as he finishes the free apps. It's going to be really exciting to see. It's going to be very, very exciting to see. I am admittedly a little bit worried about the list saying that if the reception is incredibly good and Rob doesn't want to implement it, it could still be a list accepted, because, well, it kind of like forces people to get geode and start using mods if they want to compete at a competent level. I will not be able to keep up with anything related to top play if this is added, simply because of the fact that, well, I will be at the single most objective disadvantage of all time. I don't feel like I'm at a disadvantage now on vanilla 2.2, because that's just kind of like how things work. I don't feel like there's a big enough discrepancy between the two to where it kind of affects me. But as a person who wants to play on vanilla GD, if this becomes allowed, then I will pretty much be forced to play with Geode and this mod if I want to keep up at any reasonable level, which, you know, I'm not a huge fan of. I would much rather not have to do that. But let me hear what you guys have to say. I'm genuinely curious about it. I think this is a super cool development that we've seen in the GD community over the past few days now. I think it's very, very exciting. Tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you guys around. Eat your green stuff. Stay hydrated. Thank you for making my day better. Hope my day was a little bit better too, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out, everyone.